At 61 years old, most people are afraid of being alone. But for me, the silence out here in the country, well, it is a blessing. This afternoon, the wind is blowing gently. Sitting here on the porch, looking out at the woods behind the house, I feel my soul settle down. But you know what? Sometimes, in the middle of this perfect peace, I get a sudden shiver. I shiver not because of the cold wind, but because of a thought that flashes through my mind. I think to myself, what if back then I didn't have the courage to make her stay? Where would I be right now? I certainly wouldn't be in this wooden house. There would be no Tom and no Ella. And certainly, there wouldn't be a man named Paul sitting here pouring his heart out to you folks. A man's life is a lot like building a house. Before you have strong walls to shelter you from the rain and sun, you have to start by choosing a piece of land and daring to lay that very first brick. The first brick of my life was the day I decided to propose to Sarah, my wife. It was a decision made when my pockets were completely empty and the future was as foggy as the early morning mist in this valley. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul. I was born in 1964. You might be wondering who this old guy is and why he's on here telling life stories. To be honest, I am just an ordinary husband, an ordinary father just like anyone else. Currently, I am living with my wife, Sarah, in a quiet corner of the American countryside. There are no honking horns here, no skyscrapers blocking the view. Just trees, a small garden, and the evenings where two old folks sit and watch the sunset dip behind the mountains. The greatest fortune of my life isn't this house, nor is it the savings in the bank. My fortune is my two children, Tom and Ella. Tom is my oldest son. He's all grown up now. He is just like me, quiet, a man of few words but with a big heart. And Ella, my youngest daughter, is a perfect copy of her mother, gentle and incredibly subtle. They have both grown up and have their own lives now, only driving back to visit us old folks on weekends or holidays. The greatest fortune of my life isn't this house, nor is it the savings in the bank. My fortune is my two children, Tom and Ella. Tom is my oldest son. He's all grown up now. He is just like me, quiet, a man of few words but with a big heart. And Ella, my youngest daughter, is a perfect copy of her mother, gentle and incredibly subtle. They have both grown up and have their own lives now, only driving back to visit us old folks on weekends or holidays. When the children grow up and fly away to their own horizons, the house suddenly feels strangely vast. That is when I often think about the past. I remember the early days, the days when I was just a young man with nothing in his hands but passion mixed with fear, yet daring to dream of a family with Sarah. Let me tell you about the old days. It was the late 80s, early 90s. The atmosphere back then was very different from now. Everything was slower, more genuine, and also much harder. Back then, I met Sarah in an old town library. She wasn't the flashy type of beauty that made everyone turn their heads immediately. Sarah's beauty was gentle, warm like a wildflower by the roadside. The more you looked, the more you loved. And what about me? I was just a guy working a blue-collar job, my hands always stained with grease, my clothes smelling of road dust and sweat. I liked her from the very first moment we met. But I was insecure. The insecurity of a poor man is a terrible thing, my friends. It sits like a heavy boulder on your chest. Every time I wanted to strike up a conversation, I would look down at my worn-out shoes, and then I would just lower my head in silence. My flirting back then was pretty clumsy. There was no texting, no video calls, no social media to stalk what she liked like the kids do today. I only knew how to observe silently. I saw her bicycle chain slip in the parking lot, so I secretly fixed it for her. On cold winter days, I would sneak a bag of hot roasted chestnuts into her bike basket. I did everything in silence because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I spoke my feelings out loud, I would lose the privilege of even watching her smile from a distance. Then came the time I gathered enough guts to ask her to the movies. You know what? During that entire movie, I didn't know what was playing on the screen. My heart was pounding louder than the speakers in the theater. My hand was on the armrest, only a few inches away from hers, but it felt like 1,000 miles. I wanted to hold that small hand, but I was afraid she would pull away. The feeling of wanting to move forward, but being terrified that you can't provide for her, it is the biggest obsession, the most terrible internal conflict for us men. Have any of you ever felt that helplessness? I remember nights lying with my arm over my forehead, staring at the water-stained ceiling of my cramped, rented room. I asked myself, what right do I have to protect her? Loving a woman means wanting to give her the best things. But looking at myself, hesitating over the price of even a decent meal, how could I dare to promise a future together? But then, life always throws unexpected turns. There was an event that changed everything, pushing me to the boldest decision of my life. It was when I heard that Sarah was about to move far away to another state with her family. That news hit me like a lightning bolt. I realized that if she left, I would lose her forever. The fear of losing the person I loved was 1,000 times greater than the fear of poverty. That night, I tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. I sat up, looked straight into the mirror and asked myself, are you going to live like a coward forever, Paul? If you let go now, you will live with regret for the rest of your life. The next morning, when it was still barely light, I scraped together every last penny I had saved. I didn't have enough for a diamond ring. I could only afford a simple silver band, thin and fragile, but it held everything I had. I ran to find Sarah. She was packing her things. The room was cluttered with cardboard boxes, memories being taped up and put away. Standing in front of her, amidst that chaos, I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't kneel down romantically like in the movies. I stood there, clenching my hands together to hide the shaking, sweat soaking the back of my shirt. Sarah looked at me in surprise, her eyes wide, waiting. I summoned all my courage, looked straight into her eyes and said, Sarah, I know right now I don't have anything. I only have these 2 hands and a heart that loves you honestly. I don't have a big house, I don't have a fancy car, but I have a promise. I promise to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as anyone else. I promise I will never let you go hungry, and I will never let you cry alone. Don't go. Stay here and build a family with me. Do you dare to bet your life on a guy like me? The room was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking every second. Time seemed to freeze. And then I saw Sarah's eyes turn red. She put down the box she was holding, ran over and hugged me tight. She sobbed on my shoulder. She said, "I bet on you, and I believe I will win." Her nod at that moment weighed 1,000 pounds. It wasn't just love. It was absolute trust that she was entrusting her whole life to a poor guy like me. More than 30 years have passed since that day. From that poor young man, I am now a 61-year-old man, living peacefully in this countryside beside my wife, who is still the same Sarah. Tom and Ella grew up on that very promise I made. I realized that the perfect time to propose isn't when you are richest, but when you realize you cannot live without that woman. Money can be earned later, houses can be built later, but a soulmate you might only meet once in a lifetime. Thank you for visiting my channel and listening to this first story. This is Paul's Perspective, where I tell stories about marriage, family, and the lessons of a man who has walked through more than half his life. If you feel a connection, please hit subscribe so we can talk more in the next episodes. Next time, I will tell you about the day Tom was born, and the first time I knew fear as a father. But for now, the sun has set. I have to go inside to Sarah. Dinner is on the table. Goodbye for now. And I wish you all a peaceful evening.